Today, we are going to read the story of Giant Goliath. Who is afraid of Giant Goliath? Retold by Jojie Wong, illustrated by Kempis Ang.
Let's go, soldiers! Let's win this battle!
King Saul called out fearlessly to his soldiers. He had heard that the Philistines, longtime enemies of his nation Israel, had invaded their territory. So Saul led his men to where the Philistines encamped in Soko. King Saul had won many battles in the past. He was not afraid of the Philistine army until he saw them across the mountain. Standing in front of the Philistine army, head and shoulders above everyone else, was the giant Goliath. He was so tall, the soldiers around him looked like dwarfs.
Come and fight me!
Roared Goliath. The rumble of his voice was so scary, even his own army trembled.
I challenge any one of you to fight me, and if you win, we will all be your servants. But if I win, you will all be our slaves.
King Saul and his army stood frozen like statues. No one made a sound. Sweat dripped down King Saul's forehead. His knees felt so wobbly, he thought he would stumble. He felt hot, then cold. He gulped. He was very scared. What was King Saul going to do? For 40 days, Goliath challenged them, and King Saul did nothing. Now in King Saul's army were 3 brothers, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah. They were the eldest sons of a man named Jesse. While they worried about the enemy, far away from the battlefield, their father Jesse worried about them. Have they had anything to eat? It's been 40 days since they left for battle. Jesse called his son David, who was watching over his father's sheep. David was the youngest of 8, and so he was often forgotten, unless they needed him to do something.
Go take food to your brothers and their commander,
Jesse said while handing David grain, bread, and cheese. David reached the battlefield just as King Saul's soldiers were assembling. He left the food with someone at the camp and went looking for his brothers. As he came up to greet them, he heard Goliath roaring out his challenge against Israel's army. Goliath's insults made David, not frightened like King Saul, very angry. How dare anyone insult the army of the Almighty God? David believed with all his heart that God can win against the enemy like he had done in the past. While David ranted against the enemy, his brothers got angry at him instead.
Hey, little boy, go back to your sheep. You shouldn't be here. You don't know anything about being a soldier. Go home!
Even when David was shooed away by his brothers, he continued to complain about the enemy to the other soldiers. While all this was happening, where was King Saul? He was cowering inside his tent, away from the battlefield. He was too scared to go out and face Goliath, and too worried that his soldiers might ask him what to do. But he didn't know what to do. He thought it was better to just stay inside and not be seen. But a servant would tell him what the soldiers were talking about. All he heard was fearful talk. There was no good news to bring him out. Until he heard what David had said. It was the first time the king heard anyone talk fearlessly. Even he himself could not think about the enemy without fear. Immediately, he ordered his servant to bring David to him. When David came in front of King Saul, he saw the king's worried face. He said, "Don't be discouraged by this giant enemy. I'll go and fight him."
But you're just a boy. How can you beat this giant who has fought so many battles?
King Saul wondered about. I am a shepherd. I have killed lions and bears that tried to attack my sheep. This giant is just like those wild animals. God will help me just as he did against the wild animals. David insisted. Since King Saul could not think of a better way to fight the Philistines, he let the young boy David fight the giant Goliath. King Saul put the armor and helmet on David as David tried to walk around with them. He found them too heavy, so he decided not to wear them. Instead, he armed himself only with his sling and 5 stones he picked by a stream. He went to Goliath in the battlefield, looking like a mouse before a giant lion. Goliath was amused to see David and laughed out loud.
You think I am a small dog you can beat with a stick? Come here and see what I will do to you.
David shouted back, You may be bigger. You may have your sword and spear, but I have my Almighty God with me. He will destroy you. David and Goliath ran towards each other. Goliath raised his spear and David swung his stone-filled sling faster and faster as he moved closer and closer to Goliath. Then he let go of the sling and thwack! The stone hit Goliath hard on the forehead. The giant fell to the ground with a loud thud. The Philistine army stood frozen. They were shocked and scared. Suddenly they scattered in all directions. King Saul's army quickly chased after them. Their courage had returned. Even though King Saul did not trust the Lord, David did. And God gives victory to those who are courageous enough to trust him. This story happened for real. You can read it in the Bible in 1 Samuel 17. Remember, Jesus said, Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Matthew 19, verse 14.